All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development program, and in particular the AWD 1111 or .NET Framework with Web Databases class for the fall 2019 semester, I'm creating a series of video presentations to be used in conjunction with a book for that class, which is the one you see on screen, that being Pro ASP.NET MVC 5. And a press text from Adam Freeman. I'm almost through with Chapter 25 out of 27. We're talking about validation. And as mentioned on the bottom of page 735, the last validation that's discussed in this chapter is remote validation. Notice remote validation is client side. It invokes an action method on the server to perform the validation. As mentioned here on page 736, a common example is to check whether a username is available. So if somebody is registering, how would you find out if the username they wanted to use? For instance, let's say that I wanted to register and I wanted my username to be J. Scott. Well, there's probably, if it's a big enough site, probably already is a J. Scott there. But you have to check a server or something, a database or whatever in the server to see if indeed that's the case. All right. As part of the process, an AJAX request is made to the server to validate the username that has been requested. If the name has been taken, a validation error comes up. And it says this may seem like regular server-side validation, but there are benefits to this approach. First, only some properties have to be remotely validated. It won't validate your password. It is certainly possible two people could have the same password and not even know it or care. Second, the request is relatively lightweight, so it's not taking up a lot of resources, and it's focused on validation rather than processing an entire model object. Third, remote validation is performed in the background, so the user doesn't have to click the submit button and sit there and wait. This makes it more responsive. That said, as the author mentions here, the whole thing still is kind of a compromise. It strikes a balance between client-side and server-side validation, but it does require requests to the server. It's not as quick to validate as normal client-side. All right? So we come in here, and on the bottom of page 736 and on the top of page 737, we're going to add a validation action method in here. So let's add it, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. Again, not complete, so don't worry about it. I think that'll have to go here. Should be correct now. Oh, I've got one too many ending curlies. There we go. All right. So what do we have here that you can see on your screen? It says here, action methods that support remote validation must return the JSON result type, which tells the MVC framework that we're going to be working with JSON data. That was discussed in an earlier chapter. In addition to the result, validation action methods must define a parameter that has the same name as the date field being validated. So, for instance, date for this example. We must make sure to pass a date-time object from the value the user has submitted, and if possible, check to see that the date is in the future. All right. The author says here, I'm on the middle of page 737, I express validation results using the JSON method, which creates a JSON formatted result that the client-side remote validation script can parse and process. All right, and they show it to you right here. To use this remote validation method, as mentioned here on the bottom of the page, we apply the remote attribute to the property we want to validate. So we've got to come into the appointment.cs file as shown here first on the bottom of page 737. Again, it's gray. Why? Because we're not using it yet. And now we want to do this. All right. So we want to go into the date and put that in there. And the author mentions the arguments for this attribute are the name of the action, which is validate date, and the controller that should be used to generate the URL. Well, that's home. All right. The actual URL used will be created according to the application routing configuration. It says we can see how the remote validation works by starting the application up. So, time for a file, save all, run the application, navigate over to our home booking, and entering a date in the past. We've done this before, but we have not done it before using remote validation. We can put Joe, or in fact, let's just put me in there. That's fine. Okay. So what if we started, we left that blank, but we came that in here, it said 2019. Well, it still is going to tell us that it's required. All right. So that pretty much is it for another chapter. In this chapter, we looked at some of the techniques available for performing model validation, also ensuring data has been provided in a consistent format, and we talked about constraints that can be imposed. Model validation is an important topic. It may be one of the most important topics, especially if you are talking about doing this for a website that has any kind of component where the user is going to be making transactions of any kind of a monetary nature. In the next chapter, which is very short, we're going to talk about the bundles feature, which is used to manage JavaScript files and CSS files. So I will be back with that presentation shortly.